troubles and too much sin, test will occur. Running a race we will never win without the word.
Good morning, good day, good evening, good overnight, whenever you happen to be listening to this. Welcome once again to Just Thoughts. I had hoped to do a Bible study this time and get back into that, but events around the world are shaping up, so this is going to be another current events lecture. Pretty soon after the last one, I think, to make one, but I think the things that I'm going to cover here are very relevant and need to be discussed. Are they going to change anything? No, they're not going to change anything. One world government is coming. But to be on watch, to be a watchman, means to be aware of what is going on and not to be taken in by the narratives, the false flags, and the blinded eyes of the world. So we're going to entitle this one Current Events Number 2 for March of 2022. Now, brothers and sisters, I have warned many times to be aware of what is happening in the world around you, to stay on watch, and not to take things at face value, because largely what we are witnessing now is all part of the great grand illusion. It's all part of the Kenites' bid to take complete control of the world and to bring in their one world government, which many people call the NWO, the New World Order. To do this, they have to disrupt the world. They have to disrupt the world economy and make sure that there are supply shortages and crises, that is to say, narratives, which distract from what is really going on, which cause people to miss the obvious because they are so enthralled and caught up in world events which are happening around them. I have been asked a number of times, what is the significance of Russia's invasion of Ukraine? Now, like most of you, my first thoughts were that Putin was trying to reclaim the old borders of the former Soviet Union. That would not fall out of line with biblical prophecy, and it would not fall out of line with what we know will occur in Ezekiel chapter 37 through about 39. However, that is not the case thus far. That's not what's going on with Putin right now. So, as it turns out, that is not entirely the case. Do I think Putin has his own aspirations? Of course he does. But that's not what is going on with Russia right now. Now, my first clue to this was, that is to say, with what is really happening, rather than what the mainstream media, along with the Democrats and the Republicans of our own nation, as well as the two-party systems of Canada, Great Britain, the European Union, and as well as many other places, including Scandinavia, are saying. In other words, they're all pointing the finger at Putin and calling him an authoritarian, totalitarian dictator. They're painting him in the darkest possible light that he can be painted in. And naturally, this bodes well with what most people think of Russia who remember the Cold War. And while Putin is by no means an angel, to be sure, because he was raised as a Soviet citizen, he was in the KGB, that is to say, the Soviet secret police, and he's been very outspoken about supporting the new Russian Federation's place in the world, wanting them to be the superpower of superpowers. However, what appears to the rest of us as being straightforward and cut and dry, as we're about to learn here, is not always the case. Now, the media, which we all know is owned by the elites, has not quite told us the entire truth, and boy isn't that a shock, that the media wouldn't tell us the truth. And because of this, what most are not really aware of is that NATO and the power of the WEF, that is the World Economic Forum, and the United Nations, has been setting up NATO bases all around Russia, specifically in Europe. Now, should this be scary? Maybe, maybe not. Because, first of all, we had this scandal just a little while back, in case anyone remembers it, where Sleepy Joe's son, Hunter Biden, was over there in Ukraine and doing a lot of dirty deals, and Ukraine is a very famous nation for money laundering. And that makes things untraceable. And of course he got paid a lot of money to do basically nothing but go over there and smoke crack or whatever the hell it was he was doing. But NATO, the UN, and the powers that be, that is to say the elites, that control NATO and the UN, have been courting Ukraine for some time now. Why? They want to put a NATO base there. But the media and all the aforementioned other nations, along with the World Economic Forum and the centralized banks, that is to say, including our own Federal Reserve, are attempting to crush Russia's economy with strict and harsh sanctions. Plus, they're demonizing Russia and specifically Putin. Now, if Russia was to collapse, what is that going to mean to us here in the United States? Or what's it going to mean to Eastern Europe? Because the United States is dependent upon Russia for oil. And Europe is dependent on Russia for oil. Well, if Russia begins to collapse, it will cause oil prices to skyrocket, both here in America and abroad. Eastern Europe and many other places that deal with Russia. And since we in America are not allowed to use our own national treasures, that is to say, our oil reserves and coal and natural gas beyond the levels that those in power tolerate us to have, then it's going to be a domino effect. Now, why don't we use our own natural resources? Because we have plenty of oil out in the Gulf, in mainland America. We've got natural gas. We've got coal. Well, it's largely due to environmental concerns such as so-called climate change, which used to be called global warming, and because the environmentalists claim that if we allow this oil drilling, even the Keystone Pipeline and many other things, which would allow America to be more independent of the world, we would be endangering wildlife, such as the spotted owl, the pikefish, and the whatever frog it is. Not to mention the little bunnies and the little grasshoppers and the little butterflies. Okay? So in other words, this is absolute BS, as it has always been. We have been made to be reliant on other nations. The United States is part of a coalition of nations which have been carefully, over the years, netted together so that we have to be dependent upon them, and we have to be dependent on one another in order to supply everyone with everything that they need. And as we can see around our country now, there's not quite enough to go around. There's shortages everywhere. Now, America used to be a great exporter of wheat, of corn, of oil, of many things, but we're not anymore. We may still be a superpower, but we're not the superpower we were in the 1950s. We were a technological giant after World War II. But look what we've turned into now. So we can't take care of ourselves now. We're dependent on Russia. We're dependent on Saudi Arabia. We're dependent on China. And because of these environmental concerns, we can't have our own oil. We can't have our own coal. We can't have our own natural gas. Even that which comes offshore because there might be an oil spill. Oh my God. You know, oil spills are not a happy thing. They're not fun. But they're part of the risk you take in order to have gas, in order to have oil, in order to have what you need, in order to keep trucks running, in order to keep logistics going so that people have food and trucks and trains can make it to their destinations and keep everyone fed and keep them supplied. But then again, we're being told that everything's fine, everything's going to recover, we're building back better under Biden. Yet look at your store shelves. Oh, there's plenty of toys, plenty of games, plenty of outdoor furniture, plenty of many things that, you know, are not really going to bother you to lose in a SHTF situation. But food prices are up. Gas prices are up. And what does our country come up with to solve that? Raising the minimum wage. Raising the minimum wage is going to do what? It's going to cause prices to go up even higher. Why? The companies aren't going to eat their loss. They're not going to just say, okay, we'll pay more and earn less. They're not going to do that. So since they won't do that, they're labeled as money hungry and greedy. Excuse me. You know, these same fines and levies that I was talking about just a moment ago are what drove American businesses out of America and over to China, into Taiwan, and into Mexico, and into Japan and other places. This was the only way that American businesses could survive and thrive. What is the point of being in business if you cannot make money? That's what the whole idea of capitalism is. But capitalism has been made to look evil. And socialism has been made to look so much more beneficial, when socialism's ultimate goal is communism. But that again is part of the narrative too. The war of classes, the division of people for various reasons, religious beliefs, color, creed, background, the war of the poor versus the rich, are long old compadres to the narratives of the Kenites. So now where are we in 2022? Well, most of our products that we find here in America on store shelves are made in China, or they're made in Taiwan. Most of our car parts are made in Mexico. The oil we import comes from Russia, comes from partially from China, and from Saudi Arabia. And sometimes Brazil will sell to us. So what does this mean? Well, it means we're all connected together in the pre-world government, so that if a nation or two are taken down, it will cause, like I said, a classic domino effect. If one falls, they all fall. And if they all fall, something has got to replace them. The old order must be done away with in lieu of the new order. Now, Putin is not courting war with America. He knows that that is a war he cannot win. It is, quite frankly, a war that America cannot win either, but it's also not written to come to pass in our Father's Word. There's some people that tell you it is, but it's not. There are rumors of war and wars and kingdoms rising against kingdoms and nations against nations, but there's nothing about the earth being destroyed by a nuclear holocaust. And that is what the end result would be if nuclear war broke out, unless it was on a very small scale. In other words, if Putin was to launch a missile, say, into Ukraine, or into some other country, Crimea, or Georgia, or Belarus, or any of these countries that the UN is courting to put troops on Russia's border and to set up missile silos. So, what the hell is Putin doing? Well, if we believe the media, he's becoming like Adolf Hitler. But if we really look into it, what we see is Putin doing what any leader of any nation would do to preserve their power and their sovereignty. He's standing up to the world. This doesn't make him an angel. It doesn't mean he's any less probably communist at heart, or has any, or doesn't have any future plans to make Russia more powerful. But for the moment, let's just go by the moment for right now. NATO is putting bases all along Russia's borders. They are putting troops and missile silos upon Russia's borders. They have rocket-propelled grenade trucks parked in these places. Okay? Now, naturally, Putin is going to react to this in the way we see him reacting. He's going to see it as a threat, in the same way, quite frankly, that we here in America and our government would see it as a threat if China or Russia or even Mexico were to put bases along the Mexican border or upon the Canadian border. Let's say that Russia or China were to make a deal with Canada to put bases along the northern border. Or maybe they make a deal with Mexico. Or Russia or China got together and conquered Mexico or Canada and began putting nuclear weapons, rocket-propelled grenades, rocket launchers, and troops on our borders. How do you think Americans would react to that? In other words, what if we in the United States were in place of where Russia is right now, and the shoe was on the other foot, so to speak? I can tell you quite matter-of-factly that we would react in exactly the same way that Putin is reacting and posturing now, and threatening. Case in point, does anyone remember the Cuban Missile Crisis of the 60s? 1960-61 era. When Khrushchev in Russia made deals with Fidel Castro after the Russian Revolution was going on to make Cuba into a communist nation, and they did. But then what happened after Cuba became a communist nation? Well, the Russia started exporting weapons to them, and parts, and fuel. And Russia sent scientists over there, which began building missile silos in Cuba. 90 miles off the coast of America, and within easy striking distance of all of America, there were Russian missile silo launchers. And the world was at the brink of war. But the United States did not back down. They did not tolerate Cuba to be a Russian base. And Khrushchev blinked first and did back down. And war was avoided, and the missile silos were dismantled and removed from Cuban soil. Now, the same is true of what Putin is doing right now in Russia. Again, Putin is no angel. But what he's doing right now, he's not courting war, and he's not expanding his territory on purpose. He's defending it. Putin is grabbing the Ukraine while he can. to keep it out of the hands of NATO and the UN. And why shouldn't he? After all, below Ukraine's soil runs the Russian pipelines which feed Eastern Europe. If Ukraine was overtaken by NATO and the UN, they could stop the flow of Russian oil, that is to say fossil fuels, to Eastern Europe and to the world if they deemed to do so. And they could say it's because of climate change. Or they could tell us whatever narrative they want us to believe, and the media will back them up in every way possible. When the real truth is it is a power play to cripple Russia, to bring Russia on board with global government. Now again, NATO has already established bases in Germany and other parts of Eastern Europe. They have been courting Crimea, Georgia, Belarus, Ukraine, and Kazakhstan, to come into the UN and be part of NATO. But all these nations are on the border or close to the border with Russia. How should Russia react? Well, I'm sorry, but if I was Russian, if I was a comrade, I would probably be reacting the same way Putin is. Because the UN has been courting these former communist bloc nations, again, in order to put NATO bases on them, to build silos, and to put troops on the Russian border. But now our media, that is to say our usual mainstream leftist media, has painted Putin as a terrible man. I mean, even though he's much like themselves and believes in socialism and communism, that doesn't matter. They will eat their own, if it comes down to it, to achieve world government. The Kenites are not the friend to communism or socialism or capitalism. They are simply tools that they can be that they can use to control the world. But again, our media has painted Putin as a terrible draconian leader. And they've played upon the fears left over from the Cold War stigma to mislead the world into thinking that Putin is moving towards world global conquest. And anyone who disagrees with the media or their narrative, which is in fact the narrative of their handlers and keepers, will be labeled as a Russian sympathizer or an anti-American, anti-freedom. But there is nothing more anti-American or anti-freedom than what has been going on in our nation for about the last 4 decades or so, since the counterculture began rearing its head in earnest. But more specifically, not just what's been going on for the last 40 or 50 years, what has gone on in the last 2 years, where they have really shown what kind of power they can use with a narrative. Now, my second clue to what was going on with Russia was the World Economic Fund and the centralized bank causing panic. I mean, first of all, the Russian stock market went offline yesterday, as this video is being recorded on the 1st of March. Now, nobody knows if it's a glitch. Nobody knows why it's off. I mean, I have a pretty good idea why it's off. But their stock market is falling. And guess what? America's stock market is falling, and basically has been since Sleepy Joe got into office. So they're setting up for something big. Maybe for Orange Man to return. Who knows? That's kind of what I think. But again, my second clue was that the WEF, the centralized banks, which are the same group, caused panic in Russia and Europe, and people started drawing their money out of Russian banks and out of Russian funds to further drag down the Russian economy. This is all part of a larger plan to cause the world's most powerful nations, that would be the United States and Russia, to have their economies begin to collapse, to put people into a panic. Because these two nations, Russia and America, are under the threat of defaulting on their loans. But wait a minute. The two most powerful nations in the world, I mean the big two most powerful nations in the world are afraid of debt. So then, who are they in debt to? You got it. The centralized banks, the Federal Reserve, the World Economic Foundation. In other words, the privately owned banks which claim to be federal, but are owned by the elites, aka the Kenites. You know, I have been pointing out for a long time, as our debt has grown, I think when I started talking about it, it was something on the order of 15 trillion. Now it's like 24.8 trillion or something like that, around that area. And who the hell are we in debt to? Who is the most powerful nation on earth, the United States, in debt to? And who is Russia, the other most powerful nation on the planet Earth, in debt to? Well, it isn't too hard to guess, is it? Who controls all the money and all the trade in the world and owns the media? I mean, if you haven't figured it out by now, it's not going to do any good for me to tell you. It's not hard to see what's going on here. Now, this being said, do I think this means that an imminent takeover is ready to happen tomorrow by the Kenites? No. Not yet. No. The Kenites are patient. They are the spotted animal. They are, as a big cat hunter, they will lay for hours plotting and planning and conspiring to bring about their plan. But when they attack, they will attack. However, they do test runs. Every little crisis that happens is a test to them, and it shows them how people will react. And how do they get their information? Well, they control the internet. I mean, how do you think Facebook and Zuckerberg got so rich? How do you think TikTok is so powerful, which comes out of China? You know, who do you think controls YouTube and all of these things? And what do you think they're doing with Google and all of these search engines? They're collecting data on you. They're watching what you buy on eBay or on Amazon or on Walmart.com. They know exactly what you're doing. How do you think you get those ads? Why do you think you get telemarketer calls? I mean, it's not hard to see they're gathering information on you. Everything you do. And the world is addicted to the World Wide Web. It's like a spider's web because it will catch you like a fly. And to the internet, which will net you like a snare. People are addicted to it. They don't even care. They don't even care that they're being watched as long as they have their damn Netflix. As long as they have their Amazon. As long as they have their YouTube. And great. Great. YouTube is a wonderful place sometimes. When it's used positively, when it's good for teaching, it's even good for a laugh if you want to see a bunch of funny, stupid videos. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. However, they're also gathering data on you. Not only YouTube, but Facebook, Google, all the platforms that you use, anything on the internet, they are gathering information on you. It's not hard to see what's really going on here. Now again, do I think that the Kenites are planning an imminent takeover tomorrow or next week or this year? No, I don't really think so. We saw their power manifest again in the current narrative which is going on, the current illness narrative, which has been going on since late 2019 and went on all through 2020 and 2021. But this is 2022 and it's an election year, and now we're beginning to ease back off of those policies. Why? A tiger doesn't change his stripes. Why are they doing that? Well, because they need the votes. But if they control the vote, what do they need the votes for? Well, they still need the populace to believe what is going on is absolutely real. They have to be able to trust in it. It has to have integrity. And the Kenites are not stupid. They're not going to come rushing in with weapons of war. That's not their game. Their game is deception. Just as their father, which bore them. And I'm not talking about Cain necessarily. I'm talking about Cain's father. It is my assumption that what is going to happen, and again, this is supposition, okay? This is supposition. It's my idea. It's just my thoughts from just thoughts, okay? It's not predicated in the Bible. It's not prophesied in the Bible. I mean, it is from observation of what's going on in the world, and it does have to do with many years of study in the Bible at the method. But my assumption is what we're going to see is a terribly close election in 2020. And speaking of that, CPAP just yesterday voted, the GOP voted Trump as the 2024 candidate for America for presidency of the United States. So, I do believe in 2024 we are going to see the return of Orange Man in his Superman suit. I believe he's going to be reelected and come in and save the day. And he's going to claim to do so. Yes, it was all me. I did that. I made the world great again. I'm going to make the world great again. I made America great again. Now I'm going to make the world great again. And we're going to see him forge a new level of cooperation with Russia. He's probably going to withdraw the troops. He's probably going to back things down and form a new era of cooperation with Russia. Just like when Jacob and Esau reunited, Jacob thought that Esau was going to kill him, but Esau ran up and hugged him because he missed his brother. And the world will breathe a collective sigh of relief. Meanwhile, while this is going on in Russia, we've got several trucker convoys crossing America right now, with American flags everywhere, with some pretty nasty slogans toward the current president, and Trump, Trump, Trump stickers, posters, and flags everywhere. And they're all going to meet up in Washington, D.C., and while the world is focused on them, not the news media now, the news media is not going to cover it, just like they didn't cover what went on in Canada. But while all of this is going on, this stuff is playing out in Ukraine. Again, like I said in the last talk, you always want to watch both hands. Don't watch one hand saying, oh, look over here, because the other hand will be doing something dirty and underhanded. That's why they call it underhanded. Underhanded because it's not seen. Now, certain things are going on as distractions. Am I saying that the trucker convoy was sponsored by the Kenites? Well, not necessarily, but it could be. We don't know the organizers well enough to know what their loyalties are. Do I believe the people involved in the convoys want freedom and are freedom fighters and are Americans and Canadians who believe in freedom? Absolutely. Do I believe some of them may be pawns in the game? Of course. And I could be wrong about that. Could be a completely grassroots movement. But somehow I just see it as a little too convenient. Now, with respect to Russia going into Ukraine, what did our president, Sleepy Joe, do about this? Well, he has sent troops to Germany. He sent arms to Ukraine. And he has sent a message to Russia telling them, we are imposing sanctions upon you, and you must respect Ukraine's borders. You must not go across Ukraine's borders. Well, that didn't work out too damn well, did it? Yet he's doing all of this while at the same time leaving America's borders wide open and telling us that we should be ashamed for wanting to protect our borders and keep people who are fleeing oppression out of America. In other words, Biden and the policies of the Congress and the Senate on both sides of the aisle, Democrat and Republican, are not doing anything to close our borders. They're not doing anything to control the flow of people coming into our nation undocumented. As a matter of fact, they're giving them paychecks to come into the country, entitlements, welfare, and they're busing them into the country and releasing them. And sanctuary cities are taking them in. And ICE and our own naturalization and immigration are not allowed to arrest them, nor are police officers allowed to arrest them. Does that not tell you that there's a big agenda going on? Is the world retarded? Now let's learn a little bit about the World Economic Fund. I'm not going to go too deeply into it. You can look this stuff up as easy as I can. Okay? The World Economic Fund was founded by none other than Klaus Schwab. Klaus Schwab, many of you already know the name. You should know the name with regards to what went on in Canada and with regards to certain books that he's written that are talking about the new age that must come, the Great Reset. Klaus Schwab is a German-born man of Jewish descent. He formed the World Economic Forum in 1971, and some of his friends and some of the biggest names are those who run the centralized banks around the world, such as our own Federal Reserve. And a couple of his members we know very well, George Soros and Bill Gates. Imagine that. As well as many other big name bankers and movers and shakers and statesmen from around the world. In his book, The Great Reset, Charles Schwab was quoted as saying this. And this is a quote from his book. Governments are no longer the overwhelmingly dominant actors on the world stage. And the time has come for a new set of stakeholders and a new stakeholders paradigm of international governance. In other words, he wants to do away with borders and do away with governments, which is what we call New World Order or building a world government. And he's also, I'm not going to make this quote because you're just going to have to go and look yourself. But he also speaks in the Great Reset of the reset of capitalism to be something other than what it has been. And the new contract of new socialism. In other words, the same rhetoric we've been hearing from the Democratic Party for years. In other words, socialism isn't going to be like it was before. This time it's going to be different because it's going to be American. I mean, it's going to have red and white stripes and a field of royal blue and white stars. And there's going to be baseball and apple pie and Chevrolet. And it's just going to be all well and wonderful. There's going to be fireworks. Socialism has never worked out anywhere. I know there are those that will argue with that and say, well, there are certain Scandinavian countries or certain other countries around the world where they have affordable health care because of socialism. Maybe so. But look at how their rights are infringed upon. Now some are going to say, well, my rights aren't infringed upon and I live in Norway or whatever. Of course, you got a lot of paid trolls that come forth and write these things too. There is nowhere freer than the United States of America. At least the United States of America that used to be. Not so much now, but we're still the freest nation on earth. Now, speaking of North America, the Prime Minister of Canada, who is also demonizing Putin, while at the same time subduing any voices of dissent in his own nation and going after them with time in jail and freezing their bank accounts and calling them a bunch of white supremacists and misogynists, is playing the same game. Oh, and by the way, he's also a member of Charles Schwab's inner circle, and he is part of the workshop that Charles Schwab set up on controlling the economy and using narratives to achieve certain agendas. I mean, that's probably going to come as a shock to some of you. And it's not just him. It is a host of dignitaries and big-name bankers, including the centralized banks and the Federal Reserve. Again, the movers and shakers of the world, even the Bilderberg group, or the Bilderbergs, whatever you want to call them, which all hold secret meetings to discuss money and politics and plan out the world's economy. And no doubt, secretly plan narratives and feed and instruct the media with what they will report and what they will censor. Now, I'm going to move on to not a different subject, but a different facet of this subject. Many of you probably do not know of this. Have you ever heard of the World Federation and the World Parliament movement? And yes, this is a real group. It was established in 1955. And you can see what they're all about. I will provide a link in the description below this video. And if I forget to do that, someone please remind me. Tell me you said you were going to post a link to this. But you can verify what their mission, what their constitution, and what their charter is by going to their website, http:// World Parliament -gov.org /constitution /the-earth-constitution /. Again, it will be easier for me to put a link down for you below. Please remind me if I forget to do that. But I'm going to read you the preamble to this World Constitution as outlined by this group. Okay? The World Federation, the World Parliament movement. Their preamble states, and I quote, "Realizing that humanity has come to a turning point in history, and that we are on the threshold of a new world order, which promises to usher in an era of peace, prosperity, justice, and harmony, aware of the independence of people, nations, and all life, aware that man's abuse of science, oh, poor babies, and technology has brought humanity to the brink of disaster through the production of horrendous weaponry of mass destruction, and to the brink of ecological and social catastrophe." Ecological, of course, being the environment. And social catastrophe. No, I don't think that was Christianity or capitalism or Americanism that did that. But let's continue. Aware that the traditional concept of security through military defense is a total illusion, both for the present and for the future. Aware that misery and conflicts caused by ever-increasing disparity between rich and poor. Conscious of our obligation to posterity to save humanity from imminent and total annihilation. I don't think these people have read the Bible. I'm just saying, okay? To continue with their preamble. Conscious that humanity is one, despite the existence of diverse nations, races, creeds, ideologies, and cultures, and that the principle of unity in diversity is the basis for a new age, which is right out of secular humanist New Age movement. Okay, to continue with their preamble. When war shall be outlawed, ooh, seemed like I read something like that in the Bible. Who is able to make war with the beast? Revelation chapter 13. And peace prevail, when the earth's total resources shall be equitably used for human welfare, when basic human rights and responsibilities shall be shared without discrimination. Basic human rights and basic responsibilities shall be shared without discrimination. In other words, you won't be able to decide what you want to do anymore. You're going to do whatever they tell you to do. To continue. Conscious of the inescapable reality that the greatest hope for the survival of life on earth is the establishment of a democratic world government. We, citizens of the world, hereby resolve to establish a world federation to be governed in accordance with the Constitution for the Federation of Earth. And believe me, this Constitution is miles long. You will have to read it. I have only read a portion of it. I have not had time to read all of it. And it would probably take as long to read it as it would to read the Old Testament. It is a quite lengthy document. However, it is right there on the page that I mentioned and that I will link in the description below. Now, we're going to look at the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, this is the Pledge of Allegiance to the Earth Federation, the One Earth Federation. It's just called the Earth Federation, but it means global government. So here is their Pledge of Allegiance. And you can find this at www.worldparliament-gov.org. www.worldparliament-gov.org. Okay? So here's the Pledge of Allegiance of the Earth Federation. I pledge allegiance to the Constitution of the Federation of Earth and to the Republic of the free world citizens for which it stands. One Earth Federation, protecting by law and rich diversity of Earth citizens. One Earth Federation, protecting the previous ecology of our planet, or excuse me, the precious ecology of our planet. I pledge allegiance to the World Parliament, representing all nations and peoples, and to the democratic processes by which it proceeds. One law for the earth, with freedom and equality for all. One standard of justice, with a Bill of Rights protecting each. I pledge allegiance to the future generations protected by the Earth Constitution, and to unity, integrity, and beauty of humankind, that is to say, flesh, living in harmony with the earth. One Earth Federation conceived in love, truth, and hope, with peace and prosperity for all. My God, my heart moves at that. Except, you know what? God isn't mentioned in that anywhere. Of course, you know, you wouldn't expect secular humanists or atheists or Luciferians or Satanists or Bilderbergers or any number of other secret societies which don't even recognize the God of Jacob and Isaac and Abraham, or the God of Yeshua, Jesus Christ, to put anything in their Constitution or their preamble or their pledge of allegiance that has anything to do with God. So that tells you where the foundation for this beast is. What is it that does away with religion? What is it that does away with faith? Communism. Socialism. Now, I'm going to take a short trip here, and I'm going to read to you about what is written on the Georgia Guidestones. You ever heard of the Georgia Guidestones? Well, they're called America's Stonehenge. You can look that up. The Georgia Guidestones, America's Stonehenge. And I want you to listen to the inscription on the Georgia Guidestones, okay? So here is the inscription on the Georgia Guidestones, and it's written in a number of languages for all people of the earth, okay? So there are basically 10 commandments upon these stones. They're not God's 10 commandments from the Bible. They're 10 commandments that have to do with mankind. In other words, they were conceived in secular humanism. So here are those commandments. Commandment 1. Maintain humanity under 500 billion, I guess that is, in perpetual balance with nature. Actually, I think it's 500 million, but this is such small writing, I can barely see it. So, I'm going to say 5 billion, because there's already 7.4 billion upon the earth. But they want no more than 5 billion people, and indeed this may be 500 million. Maybe that's what this is, 500 million people. I believe that's what it is. Maintain humanity under 500 million in perpetual balance with nature, okay? What is the worship of nature? Well, see, that would be witchcraft. That's what the witches' covens worship. Okay, and then it says, commandment number 2, guide reproduction wisely, improving fitness and diversity. In other words, their goal is to cause people to mix as many races as possible, which is already going on in the world and has been a thing, and one of the things that God said not to do. So they want to guide reproduction, you know, kind of like Planned Parenthood. And they want to be able to abort people at will, which they're already doing now. So that tells you that there's truth behind all of this. The 3rd commandment. Unite humanity with a living new language. A living new language. Maybe this is why English is not spoken in America as much as it used to be. They know this is going to cause division. They know that rich versus poor is going to cause division. They know that division between the races is going to cause division. So they're preaching unity, which everyone can get behind. Commandment number 4. Rule passion, faith, and tradition, and all things with tempered reason. Now, the faith that they're talking about here is probably not the faith we're used to, but rule passion, faith, and tradition, and all things with tempered reason. In other words, with fleshly wisdom. Tempered reason. Okay? Commandment 5. Protect people and the nations with fair laws and just courts. Yeah, how's that worked out so far? I mean, they want a world Supreme Court if you read into their Constitution. They want a world parliament. They don't want nations to be independent of each other anymore. The 6th commandment. Let all nations rule internally, resolving external disputes in a world order court. Gee, that doesn't sound very liberating at all, Because once the world court and the world Supreme Court rules on it, if they're anything like our modern Supreme Court and jurisprudence, you're going to see a lot of people getting the shaft. The next commandment. Avoid petty laws and useless officials. In other words, get rid of petty laws. In other words, laws are made to be broken, so let's just do away with them and replace them with our own laws. And get rid of useless officials. That is to say, anyone who's not on board with global government. Get rid of them. Make them look like fools. Demonize them. Make them look like useful idiots. And get rid of them. The next commandment. Balance personal rights with social duties. In other words, you're going to have to earn your personal rights now. You don't just get them. You know, God gave them to you, but you can't have those anymore. Your personal rights are going to be incumbent upon your personal or your social duties. The next commandment. Prize truth, beauty, love, and seek harmony with the infinite. What is infinite to you? What is the infinite to you? Is that like the Masonic version of what God is? You know, the great architect of the universe, the nameless one. And the final commandment. Be not a cancer on the earth. In other words, don't disagree with us or you'll be considered a cancer. Leave room for nature, leave room for nature. Okay? So that's what your Georgia Guidestones inscription says. Now, in the Georgia Guidestones, and in the Constitution of the World Federation, and in the preamble to the Constitution of the World Federation, and in the Pledge of Allegiance, there is no mention of God whatsoever. But then again, these people are largely secular humanists and or Luciferian, or witches, or probably even satanic. Because they wish to overturn the order that there is. Now, understanding this group, and the centralized banks, and the media, and how they control the narratives which have been going on since, well, for a long time, well before 9/11 or any of that stuff happened. I mean, we can even go back to President Nixon, who talked about a new world order, or Ronald Reagan, or George Bush Sr., when he gave his 1,000 Points of Light speech, where he declared, we need a new world order. It is easy to see what this Earth Federation stands for, and that it means business, and that our so-called elected officials of the right and left are part of it through their secret organizations. But now, let's move on to the modern internet and some of the effects of what you've been reading here and what has been policy in this country. We have the modern internet, where virtually, except on Bible teaching channels, and even some of them are teaching the wrong things, everything right is called wrong and hateful. And everything wrong is called equity and equality and liberating. Would you like some examples? Okay. Here's a beauty. This is something I've seen. It's not something I'm making up. It's not something that I'm just drawing on similar things. I actually saw this. I watched a black school teacher attempting to explain what CRT is, which is critical race theory, and what it is not. Okay, first of all, God loves all of his children. He loves every human being upon this planet, even the Kenites. And it is his will that they would all return to him and be saved through the name and the blood of Jesus Christ. God does not set a difference between anyone upon the earth, not even Israel. He did set a difference from them in times past, but now God along with Israel, wants everyone saved. There are some out there that say only Israel will be saved because they misunderstand the Bible. And they misunderstand the value of the word Israel. So, there are going to be people that say, oh, you're just a racist because you don't accept this. Yeah, that's what people love to do when you're talking nonsense in the first place, is label you as an idiot or a racist or anything to try to discredit you or make you look bad. They'll call you a neo-Nazi. They'll call you anything. But I listened to this school teacher, who happened to be black, explaining what critical race theory is and what it is not. The only problem is, she contradicted herself a staggering 23 times in the portion that I listened to. I sat there and made little notes where she contradicted herself. And I finally began to realize that she had no clue what she was even talking about. Because the crux of her entire message, in her own words, was that white people are racist. They are born racist. They're all racist. And they cannot help being racist. And they are racist because they have power and authority over others. And then she affirmed that black people, or people of any ethnicity other than Caucasians, cannot possibly be racist because they are all victims of white hatred and white savagery. Methinks maybe she should read some literature about her ancestral origins and about the ancestral origins of many people, including whites, because whites have enslaved whites. She claimed that all white people owe every people in the world an apology. Now, I'm going to break off from this particular thing discussing this woman for just a second to say there are videos up on YouTube under the label of SJW woke social cringe videos. Some of them by I can't remember the guy's channel. It seems like it's Odin's Men or Odin's Man. And there are other channels. But there are actually auditoriums filled with children where white children got up and took a speaker in their hands and apologized to Asians, to the American Indians, and to black people for being white. And I'm not kidding, I'm not joking. I am serious as a heart attack that this was seen on video. And a bunch of other people, one at a time, apologizing. Apologizing for what? No one owes anybody an apology for anything. None of us lived during that time. I don't owe anybody an apology for being white. And they don't owe me an apology for being black or yellow or red or whatever you want to call them, or for any national origin. It is ridiculous. It is so ridiculous. That would be like a German person coming up to me and saying, I am sorry that my people largely began World War I and did horrible things when they're a 14 or 15-year-old. Were they alive during that? Did they have anything to do with it? No, they're not. And they don't owe anyone an apology. Nor does anyone of Japanese descent. Nor does anyone of any descent owe anybody alive today an apology. All the slave owners and the slaves are gone. Does that mean to say that there's not slavery in the world today? Yes, there is, but the people preaching reparations and CRT don't seem to be concerned about them. Even though many of them are people of color. Isn't that ironic? That tells you it's an agenda. That tells you it has no real purpose to be. Now, like I said, there are many things that have been taught over the years, and critical race theory went from being taught in law schools to now it's moving into your local schools. You may not think that it is, but it is. It's moving into your local schools. And that's why kids are doing this stuff. And that's why so many kids today want pronouns and call themselves gender fluid. And they want pronouns like they, them, she, shim, which is a mixture of she and him. And it's ridiculous. You know, I don't think this teacher or the many more left-leaning college professors or educators in the world really realize that they're only being used as part of the division of the world. Or maybe they are aware of it. I don't know. But I know that this woman categorically claimed that only whites can be racist and this is a white-controlled world. And I was thinking to myself, maybe you ought to watch a little more TV, ma'am. Because there are more people of color on television now than in any time since there has been television. But even so, there are more messages of hate and victimhood on television and in music also than any time in history. And that is a clear shame because, you know, our Father looked upon His creation, all the races, and it was good. God's natural order made man good. Doesn't mean they're not sinners, but He was happy with His creation. And there are so many people of all colors in this world that are such good people, such faithful people, such kind people, such warm and welcoming people that do not allow themselves to be swept up in the divisions of this world. And this woman wants to teach and leave behind a legacy of whining over things that were done away with long ago, and claim that they're still as prevalent today as they've always been, which is an absolute lie. Does that mean there is no racism today? Absolutely not. There's racism, and there's always going to be racial hatred. There's going to be bias, and there's going to be prejudice. But it is not limited to any one race. I'm sure that would come as a complete shock to this woman who claims to be a teacher, an educated, who really seems to be very poorly educated in the reality of things. Now, one of her faux pas was that she claimed anyone, and she said this, she said that anyone with money and with power was a racist. Okay? So anyone, even if they're successful without ill-gotten gains, even if they're successful for any reason, and just a good business person or a person who's in the limelight, is a racist because they're rich and they're powerful. I mean, when she said that, I was thinking, so, let's see, anyone with money and power is racist. So that means like Spike Lee, Snoop Dogg, Dr. Dre, The Weeknd, a number of NFL or NBA or Major League Baseball players. Are they all racist because they have a lot of money? Because they sure have power. They open restaurants, chains of restaurants. They open all kinds of things. They have employees under them that work for minimum wage. Are they suddenly now racist? And speaking of the previous thing of all the people of color on television, how does that happen in a racist country ruled by whites? I mean, why would they allow that? It's because it's not true. It's a lie. It's part of the narrative. I mean, just look at the kids in the world today, of all colors, specifically white kids, though. Look at what they do. They mimic hip-hop artists. They try to talk as though if they were raised in a black neighborhood. How does that happen in a white-controlled world? How is that even possible? Answer. Either it's true and she's right, or she is full of empty rhetorical diarrhea. And I think it's easy to guess what the case is. But then, later on, she clarified her point and she said, oh, well, it's only if you're white and you have power that and money that you can be racist, because blacks cannot be racist. You know, that's awful funny, because I know a plethora of white people who have no money and no power. In fact, they earn minimum wage or just above it, and they can't even make enough to hardly pay their own bills or make ends meet, or to pay off the debts they incurred by getting trapped in the credit card debacle of interest payments. So is that the white privilege I keep hearing so much about? And another thing that stunned me was that this woman said it was okay for people to use certain words, such as the N-word, as long as it had an A on the end of it, because that was endearing. But if it had ER at the end of the word, then it was a totally different and vastly different meaning to the word. And I'm like, are you insane? First of all, she was speaking to a predominantly white audience. And I was sitting there thinking, why are people even listening to her? Why are people giving her an ear? Is it like the moth to the flame? Well, like I said, someone is sure listening, because CRT went from being taught in colleges, law school, and now it's moved to public school. And most of the people that you see on TikTok or Omegle or these other things, even on YouTube, that are railing against their own race, apologizing for being white, take a look at them. They look like somebody poured a melted box of crayons in their hair. They've got enough hardware on their face that they look like a Snap-on box filled with tools. And they're covered with enough tattoos to make an area rug that looks like it was produced in Iran or some other place. Imagine what it takes to make your worst enemy out of yourself. Imagine what it must be like to loathe yourself and to be so willing to color your hair mauve or green or light blue. And not just that it's a fashion trend, it is a trend amongst all of these people. They demand self-respect and they buy it of self-pity. They always played the victim card. They always claim to be disenfranchised, to be picked on. You know, one would think they're not aware that this is the year 2022. Most of the SJW woke cringe videos that you see online feature homosexuals, transgenders, fluid genders, and borderline pedophiles demanding to be recognized and lifted up upon a pedestal above everyone else. And if not, they will have a tantrum like a 3-year-old who does not get a toy or a prize whenever their parents take them into a store. It's indeed a sick world. Sodom and Gomorrah were lightweights compared to some of the people that I'm seeing on these social media videos. And all they do is whine, stomp their feet, and do a lot of pillow kicking like crybabies. You know, I saw another video stream which had about 1.2k people watching. That's 1,200 people watching it, where this black preacher was claiming that Christianity is white supremacy. Now, this guy was a real rager. and was really filled with anger. I think maybe he should probably try reading the Bible before espousing such a load of manure that he actually knows nothing about. I don't really get why people are so angry, other than the fact that many of them that get on and make spectacles of themselves are in fact mentally ill, or they did not get enough attention from their daddy or from their mama, or they just can't get enough attention, period. Perhaps it is the generation of the fig tree that they've been born into, and what they are here is what they were there. That, with a lot of brainwashing over the years, which has been going on, all of them are pleading for attention. All of them are wanting to be noticed, demanding to be noticed, saying things like, you will respect us. You may hate us, you may not like us, but you're going to respect us, and you're going to accept the way that things are. And then you've got all these people with these pronouns, which make no sense in what they say. They're simply angry people, also demanding recognition. They have no idea, largely, even what they want to be recognized for, beyond the idiocracy and psychobabble that they push. They don't have both paddles in the water. In fact, I'm not even sure they're on the boat. Always angry. Always mad. Coming up with new pronouns every day. And demanding to be recognized for their pronouns, of which about 1,000 a day come forth. You know, it's ridiculous. And then we get down to where now they're debating whether children of younger ages should be taught complete sexuality. In other words, at one time in this country there was a gay movement, and gays were recognized, but once you let gays or lesbians or transgenders in the door and they get a foot in the door, they're not stopping there. They're going to keep pushing, and they're going to keep wanting and fighting for more, even to the point of being militant. And now they're demanding that children, you know, first of all, it used to be enough. It used to be enough that you were heterosexual, or you were gay or lesbian, or you were transgender. Okay? There used to be the three, and they basically covered everything. Now they've got all these pronouns. And now they want all this taught to a bunch of kids in school. Kids who, quite frankly, are not taught history. That are not taught Christian values. It is pure child abuse and indoctrination of young, impressionable minds. And those who are doing it know what they're doing, but they don't care. Because they have an agenda to overturn the old order. Everything which is moral, right, and true, they want overturned. And that feeds into what we were talking about the Georgia Guidestones, about the World Federation Parliament, and the World Federation Pledge of Allegiance, and the World Federation Constitution. It is to overturn everything in lieu of the flesh. And the Bible speaks of it in so many places. And kids are addicted to the internet. They all have phones now. They all have iPhones. They can all get YouTube. They can all get TikTok. They can all get Omegle. They can all get all of these things. And they call it the internet or the interweb. And either name is applicable because both a web and a net are snares and traps. And we are here. This is current events. This is what's going on. And the internet is being monitored. Hey, you don't think so? Go look something up on Amazon. Or go look something up on Facebook Marketplace. Or go look something up on YouTube. And see, in other words, let's just take, for example, you're wanting a tent. So you type in tents. You go to Amazon and look, or you go to Walmart.com, or you go anywhere and look at tents. Next day you sign on to Facebook or to a number of sites, and lo and behold, there are tents. How did they know it? How did they know to show you tents? Well, it's not hard to see that they're tracking you. And God help you if you go onto a website and enter a phone number or an email address. Because you will be telemarketed to death. They will troll you to death. And your video accounts will be trolled with phishers. That is P-H-I-S-E-R-S. Trying to get you to fall for something in an attempt to defraud you. Many of them from overseas. God, you know, I remember how simple life was before the internet. And you know, that was not so very long ago. I was sitting here watching a couple of music videos and had some 70s and 80s music playing while I was actually writing some of this and getting my thoughts in line. And I was thinking what wonderful music that was from 40, 45, 50 years ago. And listen to the trash that's being poked out now, and turn on Netflix or get you a Fire Stick and watch what's being put out for people to watch. It is incredibly profane in most cases, not every case, and it is incredibly anti-godly. It's incredibly fleshly. It's an overturning of the old order. And again, it falls right in subject with what we've been talking about here. So, my advice for those of you listening is stay on watch. Stay in your Father's Word every day that you can. It's the only thing that's going to protect you from the wiles of Satan and the ways of the world, because the world is turning ever more fleshly. So, use the tools God gave you to study with. You know, get you a King James Bible. Get you a Strong's Exhaustive Concordance. Use the J.P. Green's Interlinear, the Smith's Bible Dictionary, the E.W. Bullinger Companion Bible. Use the Septuagint. Use the Masoretic texts. But don't just sit there and be indoctrinated. And don't let them indoctrinate your kids with this filth. One world government is coming to pass, one way or the other. Whether it's a more peaceful way and stars and stripes, or whether it's hardcore, hardline communism. It's coming. It's foretold in our Father's Word. Brothers and sisters, again, stay on watch. Ask our Heavenly Father for guidance as you study His Word. That is the most important thing. Make sure you have a personal relationship with your Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, Yeshua, Christos HaMashiach. Because narrow is the way that leads to salvation, and broad is the way that leads to destruction. And we can see that ever more in this generation of the fig tree. And brothers and sisters, always remember to pray for those that walk in darkness, because God knows they are the ones that need it the most. Hopefully, next time I will get to do a Bible study, but I felt that this message was important and needed to be got out there. Some will like it, some won't. I can see 20, 30 people unsubscribing. So long, have a nice day, go listen to some fluffy cotton candy preacher or some milquetoast preacher if you don't like it. I don't sugarcoat the truth, and I don't need to do like the media does and point you one way when you need to be looking another. Always check what I say out. Always verify these facts for yourself. And never take my word or any other man's word for decisions about God and His Word and things that are going on in the world. Look it up and verify it yourself. A lot of people don't have the time because they're too busy making ends meet. They're too busy struggling in the world that has been created by the Kenites to make you struggle, to pay your bills, and to find food, and to make a way for your children. At any rate, until we see you next time, hopefully in a Bible study instead of another current events or a rant, may God bless you, and thank you for listening. This has been Just Thoughts.